Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to my Halloween movie marathon. And tonight I'm covering a movie that I've heard about for a while, but I was never really interested in until recently, and that is the Re-Animator movie. There's not a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories that I've really read, although I have heard about a lot of them, such as Herbert West Re-Animator, or like The Call of Cthulhu, or In the Mouth of Madness. I believe that The Pit and the Pendulum was his as well. Either that or that one was one of Edgar Allan Poe's. I don't know, maybe I'm just confusing the two right now. But this movie has always been in talks of horror films that I've seen or heard of, and I decided to finally give the Re-Animator movie a shot. And my biggest regret is that I never watched this sooner, because this one was a blast of fun. I'm just getting right into it. The story is great about a mad scientist named Herbert West figuring out how to basically cheat death in creating this serum that brings dead bodies back to life. And everything that he does is all in the name of science, and even how far he's willing to go just really makes him an interesting character. That, and Jeffrey Combs plays this character spectacularly. All of his mannerisms, his personality, the whole awkwardness of him, where he is solely focused on his work, and again, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get the result that he wants, is really intriguing. And then acting opposite of him is, I believe the guy's name is Bruce Abbott, as basically his colleague, Dan, I can't remember what his last name was, but Dr. Daniel. And that, as well as Barbara Crampton as Megan Halsey. All three of them do a great job. The last time I saw Barbara Crampton was in Death House, I think it's called. The one that was basically billed as the Expendables of horror, which was overhyped. The film was awful. It didn't even focus on any of the actors we wanted to see, but Barbara Crampton was okay in the film. They gave her a small role in that one, but she wasn't the worst part of the movie by far. But going back to Re-Animator, she was great in this. Bruce Abbott was pretty good. Jeffrey Combs, amazing. The guy who ends up playing basically the movie's antagonist, Dr. Hill, he was pretty good. When I looked up this movie on Wikipedia, it was billed as a comedy horror movie, and I'd say that most of the comedy is sort of morbid, dark humor, mostly because of Dr. Hill's character. There's at some point in the film where he gets beheaded by Dr. West, and then his body parts get reanimated, so he's basically a severed head that's being carried around by his body. And a lot of the scenes that I kind of laughed at were mostly of his headless body just flailing, bumbling around a bit when he first wakes up, as well as whenever he has to sneak around and get past, say, a guard or other doctors, and he attaches this prop head that has half of its face being what looks like a mannequin, and the other half being a skull, and he just covers it with one of those face masks that that we've already seen a bunch of people wear during the pandemic. And it just made me laugh that almost nobody noticed that the head looked like that. And honestly, it kind of made me think of Arnim Zola from the Marvel comics, where he's just like a head in his chest, and then there's this sort of like android head or laser at the top. But uh, but those were the scenes that that made me laugh quite a bit. There were a few kind of scenes where I'd say were actually pretty creepy, especially with the especially with like how the dead come back to life as zombies. Um, going into the body horror aspect of it and the splatter horror. The effects were amazing in this film. Like, um, I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say that that it was borderline David Cronenberg with how they looked. Like that, one of the opening scenes has this one guy's like eyeballs basically getting like blown out because he was overdosed with the reagent, as it's called in the film. Um, and like every other body that shows up, except for the beheaded Dr. Hill, like always has these like really grotesque gaping wounds on them. Like one person has like a shotgun to the face, another person is like was just burned to a crisp. Another had, I think, like a giant hole in their chest, but I could be wrong on that one. But the gore is top notch in this film. I'd honestly argue that it's a lot better than a lot of the other horror movies that I've seen, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play, the Friday the 13th films, Halloween. And speaking of doing things better than horror films, I'd say even the comedy and the situational comedy of Dr. Hill's reanimated corpse just bumbling around without a head, or even like Dr. West's mannerisms or reactions to what other people say and do. I'd say, yeah, like they did the horror comedy angle even better than like other comedy horror films, such as like Evil Dead, and if anyone remembers back when I reviewed Evil Dead 2, back when I did my Road to Rise series, there were some moments of Evil Dead 2 where the humor worked for me and some that it didn't. But this is the horror comedy film that every like comedy bit actually like worked, at least in my opinion. Everything else about the film was okay. Like the music was all right. Well, sometimes the music was a hit or miss for me. Sometimes it sounded goofy, which I think was supposed to lend itself to the comedy horror aspect. The lighting, the shots were pretty good. The props were great. I already talked about like the gore and the prosthetics. The only time where it really showed was as being dated back from like the 80s was this cat that Herbert West revives towards the beginning of the film, where it's very obvious that it's a prop. And like even when it's being reanimated, like it looks like it's either a puppet or an animatronic. But I'm not gonna make that a knock against the film because like it came out in the 80s. But I'd be lying if I said that it didn't like stick out like a sore thumb, as opposed to like all the other grotesque, graphic prosthetics that we've seen, especially like the dude who has a shotgun blast to the face. But really, aside from that, like this film was great. I haven't mentioned this before, but like I think that if someone made like a Resident Evil film, like in this kind of format, except like swapped out Bruce Abbott's character with Chris Redfield or whatever, I think that they'd actually make a damn good Resident Evil film. They came close with Welcome to Raccoon City, but then they botched Leon's character. So if they if they took the template of the Re-Animator movies, of having it be like a B-movie schlock and throwing in some really good gore effects, little to no CGI, because speaking of, like, the very end, the way that Herbert West defeats Dr. Hill by overdosing him with the reagent, and like his insides just start flailing around like they have a mind of its own. Like, it just made me think of something out of Resident Evil. But again, if they take the template of the original Re-Animator movie and just throw in Chris Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Claire, Jill, whoever, and then they make Wesker the main villain, I think that it'll be a great adaptation of the video game. But that's just my opinion. Even if they don't do that, all in all, this was a great film, and I'm gonna start watching the sequels as soon as possible. So I'll see you guys tomorrow for another review, and definitely check this one out.